now there's no turning back. Your safety line has gone slack. There's no word from your friend at the opposite end, and the screen has gone black. And they're starting to fear that you'll never appear at the rendezvous point, 'cause the time's out of joint and the moment is near. You've passed the horizon, my event horizon. Since you've nowhere to go, there's one thing you should know. The quantum effect we've all come to expect isn't running this show. With what's is and what's not, no longer part of the plot. In this singular place, all of time, all of space is the size of a dot. Beneath the horizon, my event horizon. The end's always the same, love's attractions to blame. And my heart doesn't care if it's all or nowhere, that's not part of the game. There's no need to pretend, to explain or defend. Just look up at the sky and the clouds passing by on this day that can't end. Inside this horizon, our event horizon. Inside the horizon, our event horizon.
In this introduction and preload episode, we're going to take a look at the setup and basics for Ark of the Kaiser's Last Raider, as well as some historical sources for the ship. We are going to be steering in this pulp fiction, historically inspired story of the SMS Wolf. So, a lot of you guys were wondering on BGG and Facebook about this game, Ark of the Kaiser's Last Raider, a game designed by Joe Miranda. It's Folio series game number 14 by One Small Step Games. I think it's a neat narrative engine. So if you like narrative games, this is something for you, and I think it provides a little bit more, at least the feeling of more agency and a little bit more decision making than a lot of other board games that are considered to be narrative games. For example, for me personally, and I know a lot of folks are big fans of the series. For me personally, the Hunter series and Equal games don't work at all. I don't get anything out of them. There's no narrative for me. There's almost no decision making. Comparison, or in relation to that, I think Ark of the Kaiser's Last Raider is the next level. If you are interested in World War I naval warfare and pulp fiction, sort of Indiana Jones kind of stories, then this might be something for you. I personally am not so much into the fantasy aspects of it, I must say, but what I do is that I interpret the fictional characters and locations that are in the card decks as objectives or enemies to be code names for more plausible, historically plausible encounters. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the basics of the game. In this game, you're gonna take control of either the SMS Wolf, which is an armed merchant cruiser or an assistant cruiser, if you wanna literally translate Hilfskreuzer from the German, or the SMS Emden, the infamous light cruiser, which is crew did return to Germany by foot through Arabia and all that sort of stuff. A very notorious story, very famous still in Germany. However, at some point there was an expansion, and in the small step games edition here that this is included. You could also, for later games, that is, if you play campaign, pick the Königsberg, which is also a light cruiser, slightly different values, or the Santa Elena, which is a seaplane tender. So this one can bring especially 4 seaplanes here, which is an interesting thing. We're gonna pick the Wolf, or the Wolf, as you would say in English, which can also bring 1 plane as it historically did, a very small seaplane. And why do we pick that? Let me set this up like so, so that we have everything neatly in place once we continue with the setup. I picked the Wolf, even though it might potentially be one of the easier ships, because it has a very large cargo hold, which allows you to bring additional items and crew, which help you with die rolls and the like. But then it's not very heavily armed, because it's just a modified merchant, of course. All right. But it's also a historical cruiser who did raid the Indian Ocean and returned to Germany, actually, and that was widely celebrated by propaganda, and I think all the crew got medals and whatnot. There are 2 historical books on the Wolf. This is Theodor Plivier, des Kaisers Coolies, The Kaiser's Coolies. It's a novel of the German war fleet. This is an anarchist perspective on being a German sailor during World War I. And the section that refers to the author being on board the Wolf is actually just these few pages, unfortunately. So there isn't that much to get out of it in that regard. But then there is another book, which is Das Schwarze Schiff by Wieczewski, The Black Ship it's called. It has a cool cover here though. This is a problematic book. It's quite interesting because there are a lot of pictures in there. So if we take a look, what might be of interest for our little story. It is the crew here, for example. This is the crew of the Wolf. We do also have a map in the back of the book, and a list of all the crew members by name. And they have lost 4 crew members actually on cruise, and that's all. Alright. So there's a map in here. Let me bring the camera over. Hopefully it's not too shaky. This is the map of the cruise of the Wolf from Germany through, so past Iceland and through the Denmark Straits, through the Central Atlantic, and then they started laying mines in front of the harbor of Kapstadt at the Cape of Good Hope, sailed into the Indian Ocean, laid more mines at Ceylon and along the Indian coast, then circled back towards the Antipodes and Wellington Islands. So this is New Zealand, Australia. Here near Sydney they laid mines, and then back through the Bismarck Archipelago, Indonesia and so forth. And this is the max point they reached, and then they returned. And you can see that all these points here have actual dates, so that's when they were in those positions. Then they cycled back here down south in the Atlantic, then back south past Iceland and back into Kiel or Wilhelmshaven. I'm not quite sure where they actually went. So now why is the book problematic? Because it's quite racist and nationalist, and Wieczewski was one of those who perpetuated the stab in the back myth that the German army has not been beaten in the field, but by betrayal of the political elites in Germany, right? Yeah, he is a revisionist and someone who actually indicates that he's ready to fight again when the fatherland calls. So I'm not quite sure. I would have to look up actually what he did in 1933 and during World War II. That would be quite interesting, I guess. Okay, now nevertheless, we might read a few passages from these books every now and then during our story, just to provide a little bit of an idea how the crew or this guy perceived those voyages, or the voyage, and to provide a little bit of historical context and also talk about what he's saying there and maybe provide some additional insights as to what that means and so forth. Okay, so you've picked the cruiser or the ship. In our case, it's the Wolf. Then we have this overview here, which shows the objective. So the game is played in several episodes, as you can see up here, up to 6. And if you successfully win all 6, then you can continue new, and you might pick another ship and so forth. It also says how many cards you can hold. So the further you progress through the episodes, the more cards you can hold. Those cards are, and these plot cards, there are incidents and clichés. And the incidents happen immediately, the clichés can be held. And during the first episode, it's a maximum of 3. And those can be played when they apply, right? The cliché cards provide some bony. However, if you play those, you have to thin the plot. It is assumed in this game that you are actually an author during the Roaring '20s, an author of pulp fiction novels. So what we are doing here is playing the storyline of the novel we are writing, which I find from a game design perspective is a very neat tweak, because it puts us in this narrative position of weaving a story based on the encounters and events provided by those cards. And in those cards there will also be nemesis cards, which are like enemy encounters. And per episode there will be one of these nemesis, which are like very, very powerful enemies, which might appear several times if not defeated. And they are sort of the antagonist for the story, for that episode we are writing. We have to accomplish the episode, so that is accomplish the mission and the objective and return to Germany in time. The editor of the publisher, the publishing company, gives us a deadline as to how quickly we need to provide the complete novel to him, right? So that he can publish it. And with every cliché card we play, and sometimes also with the other events, with the incidents, the deadline is reduced, and if it hits 0, then we have lost the game. So what we can do is that put the markers down here. We're going to play episode 1. We have a deadline of 33 for episode 1, and then I have to look up where the plot thinness marker has to be placed. 1, 0, yes. Okay, and whenever these two markers reach each other, right? So with every turn we reduce the deadline, and with every cliché we play we raise the plot thin. So that means that we are using story hooks that the reader recognizes from other stories. So it's a boring story for them, and they don't want to read that. So the more often you use and exploit those clichés, the less popular will your your book be, and the editor knows that. And if the editor thinks the plot is too thin, then the book will be rejected. Okay? So then, we have the wolf. We also need to place markers onto the radar sheet, it's called. Savvy on 1. Savvy is the value, well, representing the skills and knowledge of the captain. And then we start with a hull value of 4, which is not very much. Engines of, I think we start on cruise, I'm not quite sure. There's cruising speed and max speed. And the Wolf, by the way, made a maximum speed of 12 nautical knots historically. Now we have 2 torpedo tubes and 4 guns, or rather a gun value of 4. We don't know where the objective is yet, so we're gonna place this marker here and the mission accomplished marker as well. And we know that we're gonna be the Wolf. We're gonna pick a mission, and there are some issues with the rulebook. There are some points are unclear, only a few, but there are some. One of which is that the rules say you should put the objective face up so that you know what you're going to encounter, right? But then later on there's a card in the plot deck that says you might peek at the objective, and I believe also discard it and pull a new one, not quite sure about that. Which only makes sense if you play it face down, and that's how I played the game anyways, because I think it's more interesting. It makes sense in a narrative way because you need to acquire the intelligence, right? So radio transmission or from agents in friendly ports who give you the mission. You don't have, if you're on a secret mission behind enemy lines, so to say, or on enemy seas, enemy controlled seas, you won't start with a complete knowledge of your mission. You're gonna have to acquire those orders. So we're gonna play that way. Face down mission cards might mean that we are not perfectly prepared for whatever we might encounter, but that is that. There will be enemy ports, so every location which has this double edged border, that is an enemy harbor. Then there are these triangles. Those are high density sea zones which have a high chance for enemy patrols, and well, those are neutral harbors, and those are standard sea locations. And how far we traveled depends on the speed we cruise, and the speed we cruise expands coal, and if we run out of coal we can't continue. So what else do we need to do when starting the game? I need to get some dice, because next we have to roll for our cargo, and as the Wolf is a merchant cruiser, rather, it has quite a huge cargo hold of 12 cargo points. We can acquire equipment and crew members. We have to place them here. There may only ever be one marker in one cargo space. Those are special. Those are the captain's equipment, a pistol, binoculars, and the cruiser handbook, which don't count in that way. They can all be placed with the captain. And if you have seaplanes in the other ship, in the seaplane tender, I believe, there can be multiple planes in one cargo hold. Not quite sure, because there also is the hangar, of course. And I think we're gonna pick a seaplane anyways. Alright, so I have prepared the deck. In order to do that, you have to sort the deck after incident cards, after cliché cards, after nemesis and über-nemesis cards. Put out all the sequel cards, because we are starting with mission 1 apparently, so there's no sequel events in there. And then shuffle those stacks individually, and then pick face down one of the Übernemesis, all the regular nemesis, and then 15 clichés and 18 incidents. So you can see, usually they are all face down, but you can see here more clichés, incidents, those that come in our next missions, and here are more Übernemesis. So I don't know who the main antagonist will be, but the deck is set up, and then of course you shuffle them all together. I have thoroughly done that. We need to roll for a few statistics. First of all, we need to find out how many cargo points we're gonna have available to buy crew and equipment throughout the whole mission, that is. So starting now at the initial outfitting, but we can also acquire more when visiting friendly ports, right? So that is 1 die roll, and a roll is 6, which is tremendous because that is added to our cargo space value of 12. So we have 18 max, and I use this wooden cube here, or the wood piece, because there is no marker for that in the game. Nevertheless, you need to keep track of that because you can spend it now in the initial outfitting, and then during the mission you only have the remaining points. And then we also need to roll with 2 dice on the radar initial placement table. There we go. And that is a 7. So we start the mission in Indian Ocean Central, actually. Very interesting. Indian Ocean Central is here. So we're already in the midst of enemy waters. Alright, so I have spent 8 of the initial 18 cargo points to outfit our radar. So that means we have 10 points remaining to buy more stuff during the course of the mission. And I have bought the following stuff. The captain, who comes for free. You need a captain to steer the ship, to command the ship rather. The seaplane, which also comes for free initially, and if we have to replace it, then we have to pay for it. We can only bring that because we have a hangar. Then I've bought all the captain's equipment, which is worth half a cargo point. And the symbols here mean the numbers. The big font mean additional combat value, so that's extra dice. The iron cross means an additional savvy rating, which is important sometimes. And the binoculars mean intelligence rating. Then we have the red cross, which means healing, and the tools, which mean repair capability, right? So I've brought the captain with his equipment. I've brought a first officer who can assist the captain, an engineering officer to repair the ship, a ship's doctor to heal our crew because crew can be wounded and die, and that would be horrible. I brought a searchlight, which is important if we have night encounters and we're going to play with the night rules. That means the enemy or we could try to sneak away during the night if certain die rolls come up during combat. I've brought Maxim machine guns, which are important, I think, especially for anti-air combat. I've brought a wireless radio, brings intelligence, a medical kit, again to help heal a wounded crews, spare parts to repair the ship, additional ammo, which allows to double the combat dice we roll, which is super powerful if we encounter the Übernemesis, for example. Then I brought extra coal twice, because this is necessary to sail at full speed, and that means moving 2 spaces. The equipment has expenditure values here. So the searchlight, if I use the searchlight, then I have to roll, and on a roll of a 1 it is expanded, it's broken or whatever. Extra coal is lost on a roll of 1 to 3, so there's a 50-50. Extra ammunition 1 to 4, and so forth, right? So that's the original, or the initial setup rather, of the ship. The ship starts in the center of the Indian Ocean. And to finish the setup, I have rolled on the board and objective placement table. And because We are in episode 1. There's one friendly port, which is the Nicobar Islands. We need to reach that port in order to learn where the objective is, right? So we have to sail down here, either this way or this way, and meet our agents there, or get the message, the secret message that tells us where the objective is. And if we do that, then we place the objective marker somewhere on the map. And we have to sail there, and then we have to successfully beat the objective, whatever that might be, and then return to Germany. And we can either do that via the coastal sea through the Pacific, via the Cape of Good Hope, or through the Atlantic, or actually through the Suez Canal and the Mediterranean. Although this is very, very difficult to pass through because of British control. Anything else to say? I don't think so. I believe we are prepared now. I hope this has provided you a basic idea as to how the game plays. We will of course continue with more episodes of actual gameplay. I plan to play at least 6 missions if I manage to win them. we will see. I also want to remind you that if you sign up for my steady campaign, which is basically like Patreon, but if you decide to support the show, and that would be very much appreciated, then you will have the opportunity to name one of the characters. Currently you have 4 main characters. There is of course much more crew on board. Let's have a look how many there are. In total there were 350 men aboard, and they also took all the prisoners, right, with them. If they captured enemy ships and sank them, they usually did that not only to interrupt the Entente merchant shipping, but also to acquire new resources like coal and food and water, because they couldn't enter any random port and take new resources and food and cargo aboard. That was not an option. They were in enemy waters. By this time they are operating here. Almost all the German colonies had been occupied already by the Entente powers. So although there is an option to play with German East Africa and Qingdao, as well as the Bismarck archipelago, I believe, as potentially friendly ports, there's a special rule. We look into that when it comes up.
The end's always the same. Love's attractions to blame. And my heart doesn't care if it's all or nowhere. That's not part of the game. There's no need to pretend, to explain or defend. Just look up at the sky and the clouds passing by on this day that can't end. Inside this horizon, our event horizon. Inside the horizon, our event horizon.